Hello and welcome to the Retail Science Podcast. I'm Jeff Gorey. This is a monthly podcast featuring the hidden secrets of top-tier retailers and how they apply AI and data science. The show features conversations with people who have been in the trenches for some of the biggest brands in retail. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe, rate, and review us to help us reach more people. Finally, we are brought to you by Retsy, Retail Science Simplified. Find us at retsci.com. I hope you enjoy this episode. Today, we are talking about what exactly retail science is. I'm joined by Hatem Sellami. Hatem is a serial entrepreneur who has successfully founded and co-founded multiple technology companies in the retail science space. Currently, he is serving as the CEO of both Retsy and its sister company, Cognera.
So obviously, I know you've been doing this for 20 years, but if you don't mind kind of doing a little bit of an introduction for what's your background with retail science and how you got started with it and all of that.
Okay. All right. So I started in a company called Retech. And at the time I was hired as a scientist in the science team that was responsible for building the forecasting engine that will drive retail demand forecasting for large retailers. So as a data scientist, or back then we used to call them scientists, the role consisted of writing the code, developing the algorithms, doing everything that will produce the engine that will drive the forecast. And the demand forecast is basically trying to predict how many units will be sold at every store of every SKU that the retailer has. So, and it's demand forecast, not sales forecast, because we want to know how many people will be coming in looking for that item. So sales forecast is demand forecast constrained by availability of inventory. So that's the difference between demand and sales forecast. Is the demand is unconstrained demand versus sales is constrained demand. So back then in the late 90s, when we talked about retail science, that's primarily retail science is demand forecasting, and demand forecasting is the most basic retail science component, if you like, because everything is going to depend on everything in the retail operation depends on a good quality demand forecast. If you know the demand forecast, then you know how many you have to order, then you know how many when you need to order them, and how many people you need to put in the warehouses to be able to serve that demand, how many people you need to have in the stores to work with the customers and serve that demand. There's so many things, so many business operation depends on a demand forecast, and therefore it's very important that the demand forecast is as accurate as possible. And science at that time, over 20 years ago, that was primarily demand forecasting. But since then, as we started dominating the space of demand forecasting, then we started getting into other areas related to that. And the other areas related are everything that helps retailers make better decisions leveraging science and data. That's what we call retail science. So for example, if we want to do markdown optimization, okay, every time you hear the word optimization in any process, that's typically driven by science. So markdown optimization, retailer has inventory, especially the seasonal items. They have inventory that they need to get rid of at the end of the season. They have leftover inventory, so they want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So what they do, they say, okay, how can I maximize my revenue from this inventory and getting rid of it by a specific date to give space to the new incoming products for the next season. Okay.
I know we're getting into it a little early, but that's fine. So with demand forecasting, I guess if your demand forecast wasn't quite as accurate as you hoped, you end up with a situation where now you need to do markdown optimization. Or
Correct.
It's almost okay.
Yeah. Well, and we all know it's not an exact science. Demand forecasting is not, you'll never get 100% accurate forecast. There is no way. So, and depending on what type of products you sell, you're going to have different accuracies of the forecast. Even for the same retailer, they will have items where they could get to 90% accuracy, and they will have items where they will get 30% accuracy. If it's an item that you sell once a month or once every 2 months, there is no way you can predict when that one is going to be sold, what day or what week even that item is going to be sold. So those very low volume items, usually you get low quality forecasts. High volume items that you sell a lot of every week, you are likely to get higher accuracies for those types of items. But in fashion in particular, because it's very seasonal, and because the volumes, when you get to item, location, and then in the item you go to the size, color, because there's so many different combinations of size, colors, then you end up with very, very low volumes for each SKU, which is a SKU is a style, color, size.
Okay.
So how many blue shirts, size medium, I'm gonna sell of this one? If I'm predicting the sale of all blue shirts like this particular style, it's much easier than this style in color blue, size M, the size, style, color blue, size large, the size, color blue, size small, so many. And then you go to the red, and then you go to the black, and then you keep on doing that for every size, and the volumes become very small. So you inevitably, you're going to end up with some items at the end of the season that you want to get rid of. And that's when you start marking them down. And that's when you can use demand forecasting and use science to optimize. Should I go 10% off week -4 before I need to get out of those items? Week -4, I can go 10%. And I know how many I will sell at 10% off. Or should I go deeper, 20%? If I have a lot more to get rid of, I only have 4 weeks of runway to get rid of them. Then there is an optimization that needs to happen, and there is a lot of science there to determine how to do that. That's one area of markdown where we apply science. So it helps the retailers make better decisions. Otherwise, without science and without data-driven decision support, then the retailers, the merchant or the buyer or the person responsible for that class or category, they will have to just pick a number and decide, okay, now I think I have this many, I'm going to go. And it's very hard to do it manually, especially because you can't do it for every store. So you end up doing it for the whole country. And in areas where the item could be still selling well, why would you mark it down when you can still sell it at full price in other areas? So there is a lot of details that science can handle, but an individual does not have enough hours in the day to be able to handle that.
How often have you run into challenges where companies look at it more like an art than a science?
That happens all the time, and less and less now than back 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, people do not trust the systems, and for good reasons, because one, the quality of the forecast was not great because there was not enough data, there was not enough information in general about weather and about many other things. And also the systems and the algorithms were not as sophisticated. Systems were too expensive to have lots of computing power. The algorithms were more simpler algorithms because we don't have enough computing powers and we don't have enough data. So there was a little bit of skepticism back then. But then over time, I think as the systems get better, as we have more data, as the forecasts become more accurate, then there is more acceptance of it. And quite simply, they don't have the time to do it anyway, so they can't do every SKU store combination to forecast. So the skepticism was, no, I know better than this, especially when it comes to in the world of fashion, where every season you're bringing in new items that you have never sold in the past, and it becomes very hard to predict those items. And that's where really the art comes into play, because they say, I know this summer red is going to be the hot color. The system will never know that it's red that's going to be the hot color. And obviously, there are techniques that were developed over the years that will allow us to overcome some of these issues. Or you're opening a new store in a new city that I've never sold before. How do I know how many I will be selling or how people will be coming to that? Again, there are techniques that can be used that help mitigate those challenges and producing more accurate forecasts. And again, the goal is not to have 100% accuracy because that's not achievable. The goal is to get it at a level where it really helps a lot. So, and as we started working with merchants early on, we wanted to make sure that the merchants understand that they still have the power and the ability to change the forecasts. Okay, so the system, we recommend to them that use the system as a recommendation. We will give you a lot of alerts and manage by exceptions. So the ones that you know they're not getting alerted, that means they're probably, the forecast is probably going to be good. If I'm selling an item, I'm selling 100 units every week in this particular store. Yeah, so the forecast is going to be 98, it's going to be 110, it's going to be 90. That's okay, keep it, let it go on auto pilot if you like. But the ones where you have erratic sales or you don't know, you have been selling 100 and you get a forecast of 20, something is wrong, or a forecast of 200, something is wrong with that, then the system will alert you as a user to those, and then you can go and check it out and make the adjustments. So we still wanted to have the science to help and support the users and the merchants and the art that they have, not to replace the art. So it's how do we bring more data and decision support to make the art even better art, if you like. Right?
No, that's perfect. What other areas have you seen it applied really well? Or
so everything that merchants make decisions in retail, and they're not just merchants, supply chain and all those people. So certainly the area of markdown optimization, the area of pricing, regular price optimization, promotion optimization, what to promote, when to promote, how to promote, and all of those things. And so many different ways of promotions. So those are there. Assortment optimization, how many styles you want to bring or how many colors you want to bring of a particular style. And because you bring more colors, then obviously each one of them will sell less, but you bring less colors, you're bringing less options to your customers. They may not like what the color they want. So what's the optimal way? And this is a very difficult problem, but we have been making progress over the years on how to achieve that with assortment optimization. Workforce optimization. So how to optimize my workforce so that I don't have to have people sitting in the store idle and there is nobody there. So I'll optimize where to assign people to what stores during certain periods of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just, and of course, supply chain, warehouse management, how to optimize, even where to position your warehouses, even which items will be served from what warehouse based on demand. Obviously how to order and how many to order and when to order them and all that, so that you don't carry too much inventory unnecessarily. So I would say everything, and even in marketing and marketing mix, there's a lot of science that is happening now in marketing mix modeling and optimizing your marketing dollars and where do you spend your dollars. So there's lots of areas in retail, and we keep on getting better and better at it. And the retailers, thankfully, are getting better at also accepting this as a support for them.
So with better inventory management, has that actually created a challenge on the supplier side too? Have they now gotten to the point where they almost have to predict what the retailers are going to do, who are in turn predicting what the consumers are going to do? Or has science not gotten down to the wholesale level?
No, the science has gotten to the wholesale level. In fact, the wholesale or the distributor or CPGs, vendors and suppliers, let's call them suppliers to the retailers, the problems there are a lot easier to handle because usually the volumes are bigger and the number of items is smaller. So the problem is significantly smaller. A typical retailer, they may have 1,000 stores here, at least in North America, they may have 1,000 store and they may have 50,000 SKUs. That's a lot of SKU store combinations. That means that's a lot of forecasts to calculate every week. So whatever science you do, you have to do it at the scale of those large retailers. You go to the suppliers, usually most suppliers, we're not talking about Procter & Gamble and the big players like that, but most other suppliers, they usually have a very limited number of SKUs. They could have hundreds, they may have a few thousand SKUs, and their customers are not that many because they probably sell to Target. When they sell to Target, they just need to know how many distribution centers Target has, maybe 50 or 100 or however many. It's not going to be in the thousands. So the number of SKU location combinations in the supply side is significantly smaller, and the volumes are much higher because they're based on shipments where they group lots of items together. So it becomes an easier problem to solve, and as a result, they have been, because the forecasts are more accurate on that front, so they have been more receptive to forecasting, and they have been using forecasting, I would say, more. Not just forecasting, even the optimization, even price optimization or markdown optimization or promotions. They have been using science, I would say, longer than retailers.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What about internationally? Do you see the same applications of retail science internationally that you do in North America or in the US, or does it change?
Yeah, definitely. It's the same. Obviously, there are certain parts of the world where retail is more advanced than others. So, for example, I worked with a retailer in South Africa, where retail is very advanced in South Africa, and they are very innovative. And I can tell you, they are one of the most sophisticated retailers when it comes to forecasting algorithms. Wow. And how it was forecasting to drive replenishment and to drive other business operations. Obviously, in Western Europe and Australia, these are really the regions, in Eastern Europe even, the regions in the world where they have been adopting science in general. And of course, in other parts of the world where retail is still being organized, or organized retail is still developing in those countries, it's going to probably take them a little while. And quite honestly, many of them are smaller retailers that they don't require advanced systems with highly scalable capabilities that will allow them to work at the scale that a North American retailer wants. South America also, there are quite few large retailers that adopted science, and they will continue. I think there's still a long way to go. There are a lot of retailers, large retailers, very successful retailers, even here in the US, and they're still not leveraging science in all the areas where they should be leveraging science.
What about across different segments of retail? Do you see a lot of the same problems, or do the problems change when you move into the groceries or the hard lines?
Yeah. There are differences. The similar challenges, if you like, but the solutions can be different or should be different. If you take a soft lines apparel retailer, what they deal with is very different than a grocery retailer. Okay, so grocery, for example, what makes grocery is fresh, and fresh items, they have short shelf life for those fresh items. There is the quality. If you're buying produce, not all the items will look exactly the same. If you're buying a tomato, there are good tomatoes, small tomatoes, large tomatoes, and people will be picking the right tomatoes that they want. Or if you look at yogurt or milk or dairy in general, people sometimes look at the expiration date, so they may not buy the item that will expire in 2 days, but they will buy the item that will expire in 10 days, etc. So there are a lot of things that they need to deal with that a soft lines retailer or even a hard lines retailer doesn't even care about, right? For soft lines, what they do though is a lot of it is driven by financial planning, and they do the merchants, and this is where the art comes in. They start to do financial planning, and then they determine the open to buys and how much they want to spend on each particular class of items or of styles, and then they focus more on trying to sell as much as possible at regular price, and then they use markdown to just mitigate the risks that they have with additional inventory or whatever. So those deal with things because they have an end date to when the inventory has to go out. Also, they have to deal with weather because if the winter comes in early or if the summer comes in early or late, then what happens during those? So there are a lot of nuances between the different retail verticals. However, they all need high quality forecasts, and they all know and more believe that science is going to help them. Okay, but there are also other things that are common across all of them, which is everybody wants to minimize inventory so that they only buy what they need.
Absolutely.
To meet the demand. So how can I reduce inventory as much as possible? So that's why the concepts are the same. The challenges at the high level, they're the same, but how to approach them, how to deal with them, when you go into the details, then things become different. And they become different to a point that you definitely don't use the same algorithms when you are dealing with one vertical versus another vertical. Okay. Now, there are some, even hard lines, for example, now more and more with iPhones and phones and smartphones in general, they're becoming more like fashion items. And therefore things that they used not to deal with, now they have to deal with similar to the soft lines retailers. So now you have phones, for example, every year, we know in the fall, Apple and Samsung are gonna release new phones. And you can't sell the old phones anymore. So that's almost very similar to the seasonal clothing items. So they have to deal with that. And then along with the items, not just with the phones, the smartphones themselves, the smartphones also similar to the size and color. They come in different colors and in different sizes of the memory or the processor or whatever, or the storage. But similar to that, there is a lot of other accessories that are sold along with those items. So that's something else. The same thing with laptops and computers in general. Most electronics are becoming more behaving like fashion from a retail perspective. So those are a special consideration that need to be taken into consideration there.
No, it's funny you say that, because I think about even walking through a Lowe's or a Home Depot these days, and now they have grills that are in 15 different colors and 5 different sizes, exactly the same concept that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if somebody's working in retail, when should they think, hey, this part of my job might be something I could solve with a scientific approach? Or what jobs might really have a lot of problems that are solved by scientific approaches?
Yeah, in general, I would say they can either rely on consultants who will come in and help them, consultants who know retail and who know science, like us, and they can, take a consultation, and we can point out the areas where there is value. But in general, anywhere a retailer or a person in retail finds himself or herself having to make a decision, and the decision is dependent on certain performance of the business, whether it's historical sales or price changes or something like that, whatever it is, if they find themselves in that situation, chances are science can help that, especially if it's something that requires a lot of effort. If it's something that is repetitive and requires a lot of effort to make a particular decision, that's probably an area where science can help. And of course, I've only been using science, and science, this term here, that's the term we've been using for the last 20 years. In recent years, people are using more AI and ML, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all of those things. I'm using science to include all of those buzzwords, right? And they are
Great.
buzzwords. People are overusing them, and these are big words. They're not new, but just they became mainstream recent years. But we have been using them for the last 2 decades plus. The same techniques, the same concepts. It's just now they're becoming more mainstream.
No, that is a fantastic point. And yes, I think a lot of the, like you said, deep learning, machine learning, all of those things, I'm sure have been very commonplace in kind of the science toolkit over the last however many decades. So, no, fantastic. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on the end of this. So, anything else that you feel like is important or necessary to mention, or that everybody should know about retail science?
Yeah, I think it's very important for retailers of all sizes to just think about what can they do by leveraging science and data and computing power to increase the performance of their business, especially in a world that is super, super competitive now. They are facing retailers, especially the pure play online retailers such as Amazon and others, who are really very heavily biased towards technology. And if more traditional retailers, if they don't equip themselves with the right technology, with the right science, they will not be able to survive against these really technology companies that are doing retail. That's what they are, the likes of Amazon. So they really, all retailers need to up their game when it comes to science and technology in general, to be able to be better competitors and defend their turf and keep their customers and keep growing their businesses. So I think that's my recommendation. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the time, and no, I think these were some great points as we look at retail science and what it does. So have a great rest of the day, and thank you again, Hatem.
Thank you, Jeff. Bye.